Well, it is a very high number, and it's cause it is of concern. When alarm bells ring, you must pay attention. But I think we must understand the number. As you said a bit earlier, this is a huge number because of the outbreak of foreign workers' dormitories. Because of the outbreak, our government is testing much more. And this disease, the more you test, I'm afraid, the more you will find. We are the largest number in Southeast Asia, but that's because we have tested the most. I think that if other countries start to test at the ratio we're doing, you might find the numbers will all go up, which is alarming but good. We need to assess the problem to really deal with the problem.
Simon, the spreading of the virus among the foreign workers, was it something that had been anticipated before?
Well, the foreign workers' dormitories are quite close together. So this is a lesson that where it's very difficult to socially distance people, once one case happens, it really ripples through. We have a lot of foreign workers, and they're spread out over more than 20, 40 dormitories. At the moment, the infection rate is about 1% of foreign workers. So it's not so high percentage-wise, but because of the large number and our overall small population, it makes our numbers jump.
How are you dealing with, specifically with this particular situation, then the spreading of the virus among the foreign workers?
Yes. So Singapore, in a way, has two approaches. Say, for the general population, we continue with circuit breaker. For the foreign workers, because it's more intensive and they are living so close together, we have to give special measures. Our government has put medical teams inside the dormitories. So there are medical trained staff there to try to test their symptoms, provide testing and care very early. If any one of them develops symptoms, of course, they are taken out and quarantined, or when it gets worse, they are sent into hospital care. And of course, in Singapore, providing equal care for foreign workers, and all of it is free, just like for citizens.
Simon, you said Singapore has tested more than other countries in the region. Can you tell us what's the procedure in testing in Singapore?
We are still using more of the nasal test, which we feel is more accurate. So our government has not started to roll out the DNA or blood testing yet. Blood testing, not DNA testing. So it is quite laborious. It takes hours still. Now we are, of course, the government is, of course, monitoring the availability of reliable tests. But we are a bit concerned, I would say, and want to be conservative to use the test really is very accurate. Otherwise, you test people and they could be still asymptomatic carriers. That's worse. So our numbers are not the highest in the world, but we have tested per million people over 13,000 people, which by Southeast Asian standards is the highest.
So how do you see the trend in the next 1 week?
We don't know. I think leaving aside the foreign workers, if I could talk the other problem of the overall population, the numbers actually right now are quite stable. In fact, they are falling a bit thanks to the circuit breaker. We mustn't be complacent though. If anything, we have learned that while we did very well at the start, this problem has caught us a bit slow. So in a way, the humbling lesson is that this battle isn't over until it is really over. This is a complex problem. It will be long drawn. And even if you do well at some stage, a future problem might really surprise you. And the smallest weak point, this virus will find it. I think this is one of the humbling lessons that all of us will need to learn.
And with a given situation, does it mean that Singapore will have to extend circuit breaker to prolong it?
That's a good question, but it's a different question from the foreign workers. As I said, our government is trying a sort of two-system approach. For the circuit breakers, of course, there's also a lot of work to be done. As you know, we don't have a full lockdown. We've closed public spaces like Thailand, shopping malls are still open for certain shops, but we are being very close monitoring, trying to keep social distance. It is not easy to teach citizens new habits. We're about halfway through a 4-week circuit breaker. I think, frankly, it takes 2 weeks for us to learn anything. For me also, working from home with these strange lights is not the same as being in a TV studio. So even though, we try, we're all learning new habits. We are getting cases where citizens or some companies still aren't taking it seriously enough. We've changed some rules. In the past, you could walk around Singapore without a mask. Now, we are told we have to wear a mask, unless, of course, you're running or exercising strenuously. So the circuit breaker question will only be answered on about the 4th of May, when the government will give an answer. But if we look at the region and the world around us, I think it won't go back to what it was before. We've got to be a bit more careful. Otherwise, whatever good we've done during these 4 weeks will also disappear. So I think a lot of governments are looking for what they call an exit strategy, whether it's in California or here, and we'll probably make a decision quite soon.
I see. And do you think that the fact that the ASEAN leaders and leaders from China, South Korea, and Japan met online last week and came up with a joint action plan, would this be helping with the individual countries in the region in the fight against the virus?
I'm very hopeful about ASEAN. Now, I believe that every country must be the primary actor. They must make the real effort. So in Thailand, your government. In Singapore, my government. But there are areas where we really need cooperation. When you send people across the borders or stop flights, how do you restart? That's something to think about. The fund you mentioned is critical. We have enough money in Singapore, so does Thailand. But if we don't help the countries around us, ASEAN's integration, ASEAN's community will all break down. Even now, we're facing supply chain problems. Japanese, many companies use Southeast Asia as one market, one production base. This is what ASEAN community is about. But during this crisis, some people have cut off supply chains, either intentionally or accidentally. And we've got to make sure that our supply chains, our trading goods in and out is much more resilient. Of course, medical health is important. That's why China, Japan, Korea, I think are very important players to bring in. They have the size, they have the manufacturing capability. And China, because it was early in, is now coming out. There will be some problems, but they seem to be coming out quite nicely. And they can provide some of the equipment, some of the help, and so can we. I think Thailand is ramping up its production of various test kits and masks. I think this will be a good thing to have in the ASEAN community as a whole.
But how do you think ASEAN stands up to the crisis as a regional grouping?
Well, like I said, oftentimes when there's an initial panic, it is all countries for themselves. Even in Europe, when they talk about European Union, really very close. When the first problem happened in Italy, European Union did not do enough. It was really Italy on its own. That is the harsh truth. We first care about maybe our family, our neighborhood, then our friends, and then our country. Now, ASEAN community isn't our first response. But I'm glad it is our second response, because that shows we can work together. We have to work together because we are so close to each other. Our economies are all doing well, very integrated. The movement of our people. Among our foreign workers are many Thai workers. I'm glad to say that our government is giving them free treatment on the same basis as giving Singaporean.
How are they being treated right now, Simon, for those foreign workers who are infected? Are they being treated in hospitals?
Yes, they are sent to hospitals and they're given the same medical treatment as citizens free of charge. At the moment, we are lucky that because of the previous experience of SARS, we ramped up the hospital's capabilities for various treatments, including diseases. And our capacity is not over capacity yet. We're able to manage. The other good thing about the foreign workers is that most of them are quite young and quite healthy. So at this moment, the last figure I looked at has no single foreign worker in ICU, in intensive care. They seem to be coping with disease. The numbers are high, but it doesn't seem to be at the moment life-threatening for many of the foreign workers. We've lost 11 people in Singapore. I think is it 12 today?
And what about measures overall in the country? Will it have to be this way for quite some time, like working from home, social distancing?
Well, I think that the measures we have taken, Singapore government has tweaked them. When a lot of people has closed schools, we kept the schools open until very recently, until 2 weeks ago. We kept most offices open until about 2 weeks ago. So I believe our government is trying to get a real assessment of the problem and trying to give people as much freedom as possible for both their social needs and frankly for the economy. If we can keep going to work, we can keep education among our kids, it is easier for life to be a bit more normal. But health first, safety first. So having tightened now, I think that we must be very careful about loosening up. So I expect measurements which will be very precise. If the numbers for the local community remain quite solid, I think Singapore can manage. I keep confidence in my country. The same capabilities that help us SARS, the same spirit of people will see us through this problem.
Simon, as we have seen, the U.S. President Donald Trump has been pointing and accusing finger at China as far as the origin of the virus is concerned. And over the weekend, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo called on China to allow the U.S. access to the Wuhan lab, which has been a touch point between the two countries. So when you think ASEAN countries should stand on this issue?
Well, I think it's very sad. Right now, I think we should not be finger pointing each other and looking backwards. The key is cooperation going forward. The double sadness of this, if you read what America and China did during SARS, during Ebola, during H1N1, the medical health authorities on each side cooperated. Many of the Chinese experts were trained by American experts during SARS, which is like more than 10 years ago. In West Africa, they were in the field together. Cooperation continued right into Obama's regime. It is only Mr. Trump who is trying to bash China. And this went back before this, of course, about the trade wars. So just as then as now, my view is that ASEAN should not get involved. We need to be very pragmatic. Of course, if America can give assistance, test kits, etc., we should accept. ASEAN should never be too proud to accept the hand of help from a friend. So America should remain our friend. But equally, if it is China who can help us or Korea, we will need help. Thailand may be okay, Singapore may be okay, but we mustn't forget our other ASEAN countries who are less developed. Their health systems are not as good. I've been inside some Thai hospitals. I wasn't a patient, visiting a friend. They're very high quality. But I have been inside hospitals in other ASEAN neighbors, the developing ones, and their quality is not as strong. So ASEAN will need help. And if China or America can help us, I think we will need to help, receive the help.
And what's the geopolitics you can foresee right now after the crisis, especially the role of China and the US?
Well, I think a lot of it goes back not just to the health issue, but the knock-on effect on the economy. Predictions right now, if the China numbers are correct, they will achieve actually a relatively small but positive growth this year. And the trajectory will go up. Even today, though they're still in the middle of the problem, the cargo going into China and coming out has ramped up incredibly. There's a shortage of flights, but China is trying to demand goods, demand inputs. If China can keep this up, it can actually come out of this economically ahead. But politically, that's the question mark. Politically, I think there are hard questions for China to answer about how truthful it was about the problem at the start. Now, I think some American media have played it up a lot, but of course we know there was some hesitation among the Wuhan officials. That's coming out very clearly now. But additionally, China must offer help in a way that is much softer. It must not expect that you give only to your friends. I think China really needs very benign and benevolent leadership will be much appreciated by the region. So if China can do those combinations to really come out economically ahead and to be quite soft and moderate in its politics in this stage, I think it will have more of a halo effect. You remember the Asian crisis? Kunata is too young, but I was around. Asian crisis, we all thank China for keeping growing and keeping its yuan stable. And I think China could, if it plays its part right, be benevolent and show leadership in this way.
Yeah, another helping hand from China would be much appreciated. Yeah.
And Simon, for how many days have you been working from home?
For the full 2 weeks. I'm a non-essential worker, you know, so and I'm very lucky. My work as a think tank, talking to you, talking to friends by Zoom, reading books, analyzing, writing newspaper columns. We, as ASEAN think tanks, got together on Zoom, including ISIS Thailand, and we submitted a memorandum to the ASEAN governments just before the ASEAN summit. A number of our recommendations received a favorable attention, and we hope that ASEAN really will listen to the think tanks and more to the citizens to really deal with this problem in a very thorough way.
But how do the Singaporeans in general cope with the lockdown?
Well, I think some of us are feeling a bit antsy. You know, Singapore, the houses aren't as big as, America, but they're not as small as Hong Kong. So it depends on what you're used to. In fact, on a more serious note, I think this is why I'm very grateful my government kept open the schools and the offices as long as possible. For every one Singaporean kid who goes home and there's a nice room with a computer and a Wi-Fi and, you know, he wants to drink, he gets a drink. There are many kids who share home and many parents who've got, too many kids, and it becomes harder for them at home. So like a lot of societies, we have the uneven effects of the stay at home. If you're in school, you're more even. Everyone's got one desk. Everyone's got the same teacher. When you're at home, your facilities and your tutor, aka your mother, or in some cases, very few, unfortunately, your father, is not the same. So I hope that some normality will return because our public systems are quite good and quite equal. And though, of course, Singapore is not so uneven, there are differences of people's home situations.
Okay. Thank you very much, Simon Tay, for joining us from Singapore. Yes.
I really hope that ASEAN will get their act together because everything I said about Singapore, the foreign workers, the inequality, is right through ASEAN. Sometimes they're not foreign workers. They can be your own citizens, but the housing conditions are too tight. If infection starts there, it can spread so fast. Please take care. Keep safe.
Okay.